sake of time and everything for everybody. So my name is Cindy with Erins House. I was driving in today and I was like, these are my people today. Usually I come into a presentation, I'm like, hi, I feel like the Grim Reaper. I'm like the person coming to talk about dad. And I'm always like, I'm really happy and excited to be here. But usually it's like, hi. So I feel like you guys are my people, like hospice nurses and people who, work in this field. Like maybe we didn't choose to be in this field, it was maybe chosen for us. Maybe we did choose, maybe something happened, life happened. But I feel like you are my people, so I'm very happy to be here, and I feel like I can say that and not sound weird about it. So my name is Cindy, I'm with Erins House. I don't know if all of you know about Erins House, and I'm not gonna take a whole lot of time. I actually put what Erins House is at the end, like with our main programming, but I just, whenever you go into what is your organization, you always gotta put a little hot spot in there. We are a little bit far, but honestly, it only took me about 35 minutes to get here from Fort Wayne, so it really wasn't that far. I thought it was gonna be an hour. Thank goodness it wasn't, because we needed a minute to get this going. I thought I was gonna be running in here. So, it's important to know just that Erins House, what we are is we are a non-clinical based organization. So what that means is we provide peer support for children, teens, and their families to come when they've experienced a death. What that is important to know for you all is that we don't necessarily provide peer support for children who are anticipating a death. So we have resources and we have toolkits for families when they do have a family member who has a terminal illness and they're going to be anticipating that death. When I first started at Erins House about 14 years ago, we did have peer support for children who were experiencing that terminal illness of a person who was going to be dying. However, what we noticed and what you all probably noticed is those families want to be with their person who is dying. You have moments, you have hours, you have days, you have months, you have weeks with that person. They didn't want to go be away from that person. And so our programming wasn't peer support, it was one family, maybe two families. And so it wasn't a true peer support environment. And at Erins House, that is truly what we are, because we are not clinical. We do have a few counselors. We had a few counselors on staff. They have now moved on. We do have counselors. We are a volunteer-based organization, which is hard to do right now these days. But we do have counselors. We have school teachers. We have wonderful people that work within our organization. But our main programming is peer support. So that is children, that is teens, seeing that they are not alone in their grief, and that is a huge impact. And so you got to put in a plug to know who we are, but it's understanding that it's really that family, it's that community feel, and knowing that, if my person died by suicide, if my person died by cancer, if my person died by a homicide or COVID death, that I may be surrounded by other people who maybe had that similar loss. But really what's understanding is that I am like 9 years old, I am this high, and there's somebody else out there, like that whole my people feel. These are my people, this is my community, and I'm feeling those similar experiences and those similar big feelings. So that's important. So, Sherry, who I think she is in Fort Wayne, but she had come to me at Erins House, and she is telling me the great work that all of you do, all of the people at Parkview and the hospice department do, and that she straight up told me, you guys are doing the great work, but the conversation has come that like when we encounter children in the homes that we do the work, we just want to make sure that we're doing what we're doing. And her and I had a long conversation about, she's like, I know they're doing the right work, I know they're doing great work, but she wanted Erins House to come in and just really make sure that you guys have the tools and the spaces to understand children in grief, really. So that's what I'm hoping to give you, those tools and those resources today. There is not going to be a aha, like, oh my goodness, I gave you everything. Like when you walk out of here, you're not going to be geniuses, because even I, who have been around for a while in the grief world and the kids' grief world, I am not a genius. Those kids teach me every single day, but what I hope by the end of the day today is that you feel more empowered to know that you are doing the best job that you can, especially knowing the hard work that you're doing every day, being in those homes, but when you encounter a little or when you encounter a teenager. The best thing that you can do, and we will walk through those stages of the kids, is that you're not ignoring them and that you're creating a safe place for them and that you might be sort of that neutral person for them. And we'll talk about that and what that looks like. So that's what I'm hoping to give you and give those tools. So let's talk about that. How do children grieve differently? You know, think of us as adults. We as adults, we are able, you know, you all do such hard work. We are able to sort of compartmentalize all of our feelings, all of our stuff. We may have a really hard day. We may be, you know, our kids, our partners, life may deal us a bunch of cruddy information. You know, in the morning we can compartmentalize that and deal with our work. Work gives us cruddy stuff. Our patients may die in the homes, you know, whatever it is, and then we can that is the hardest word for me to say, and I keep trying to do that. We can stuff it in, right? We can stuff it in, put it aside, and then we can go back to life, right? And then we can go back to whatever life dealt us at home. And then we have all of these spaces. We have all of these home edit bins, I like to say now, because they're, you know, they're all the rage right now, right? And we have all these bins, and we're able to put this stuff, and we can do that mostly pretty good. Maybe we have ways to deal with that. Maybe we have coping skills, people that we can talk to. You know, we figured that out, right? We're able to maybe fake it until we make it, right? And maybe we don't make it, but we fake it pretty well. Caffeine, I like cookies. I had a lot of Oreos yesterday. You know, maybe we've got our vices, right, that we can do. Kids don't have those tools and don't have those skill set yet. So when kids get mad, we know that they're mad and they're going to tell us they're mad. And if they're not old enough to be able to know what mad and frustration and anxiety means, they're going to show us because they're going to act out. So kids don't have the ability to do all those things. Kids express it through play, they express it through their behaviors. Sometimes kids, when they're going through those struggles of having somebody who has a terminal illness, or then when that person dies, they regress in their behavior. So you have a kiddo who is fully potty trained, a kid who is able to sleep through the night, who doesn't need night lights, who is able to go to school all day long and not worry about their adult and what they're doing, has now regressed in that behavior. So now they're wetting the bed at night. They're not able to be without their adult. They're now worried about who is going to die next. It doesn't mean they're actually verbally expressing these things because they may not actually understand what their worries are. But if their primary caregiver has died, you know, maybe they had a nuclear family and they have a mom and dad in their home and their mother has died and now they're completely attached to their father and their dad cannot go to the restroom on their own. You know, they're completely attached to their siblings. They have younger siblings and now that sibling, they're holding their hand everywhere and they're having to check on them everywhere, but they're not able to verbalize what is happening. They're completely regressing in behaviors. They're having tantrums. You had an easy kid before. Now you're having a very difficult kid. These are all normal and natural responses, but that child is not able to verbalize that I am stressed out. I am worried that you are going to die next. I am worried that I'm going to die next. I'm worried that grandma and grandpa are going to die next. I'm worried that we're going to have to move out of our home now because now we're only on one income. I'm worried that we used to be able to have all the snacks in the world and now we're, you know, having to have people bring us food to be able to make it. You know, they're not able to work, to verbalize those things. So these are stressors that we as adults also have when we have somebody who has had a terminal illness. These are stressors that we have as adults when somebody dies. But we can verbalize those things. We hopefully have coping skills to be able to deal with these things. Kids do not. And we also, while we have our little bins, right, and we can compartmentalize those things, we always don't do the best job, right? This morning, I am a quick person to call myself out. I should know, I talk about this all the time. I talk about that paper over there that I passed along that talks about a self-care plan and talks about talking about your feelings. I lost it, not like super lost it, but I snapped at my kids today because they were not listening to me this morning and I knew I had to be here at 9:30 this morning. And I knew it was gonna take me 8:30, I'm like, could you just get your shoes on, we gotta go. You know, and so, you know, we cannot always keep our stressors in, and sometimes we do snap, and sometimes we do go. So imagine having that death. If we are in this room and we are under stress and we are under anxiety, and then we're personifying those feelings onto our kids, they can feel that, they can see that, they can, my car ride to school was a little bit quiet for the first 5 minutes, and then I had to call myself out and be like, all right, guys, sorry, like, just had to get to work on time, and then we put on a jam, we got it out, and then we were cool. But not all of us have the ability to do that. And if I was experiencing death, or I knew my spouse or whatever was going to die, I may not have the ability to just wiggle it out and move on, right? So thinking about that kind of stuff. At Erin's house also, we say if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve. So that's really all humans, right? All abilities. So can everyone, I feel like I'm in everybody's ear. Maybe I should be over here. That way you're not having to stare at me. So even though at Erin's house, so we say it's 3 to 20. This is the, obviously because 0 to 2, they're humans too, right? I do always like to talk about this age group because you're gonna encounter this age group when you have them in your homes, when you're dealing with your patients and when your clients and everything. And even though we don't see them at Erin's house, I think it's important to mention. Obviously, because I am not a hospice nurse, I don't know what the rules and the regulations are. I don't know what you're able to do and not to do in your homes. And so obviously take what I say quite loosely in case that you're not allowed to do it. But it's important to understand that this age group does grieve. This age group obviously is very aware of what is going on in the home and in the environment. So think about if, you know, someone has died, or if obviously that person is dying in the home, there is a lot of shuffling going on. This is probably the age group that is least worried when it comes to a terminal illness, because these are babies. These babies aren't going to have the memories. These babies aren't going to remember. So these are the babies that we have to least worry about. They just need to be clothed, they need to be fed, they just need to be having their basic needs taken care of. When it comes to their emotional needs, we're not gonna have to worry about them, right? When it comes to grief and when it comes to the fact that this person's going to be dying. That is just simply untrue, and so that's why these are really the forgotten grievers when it comes to death and grief. And so it's important for you all just to be aware, and again, not understanding the rules. I should preface for the first 2 spots of the what helps. This is kind of our general PowerPoint when we go and do presentations for different places and spaces that we do for a lot of places, but I really try to think about when it comes to your roles in the homes. The first 2 points are really what I will be talking about for your spaces and your roles. The others are just kind of points that we go and talk about for other places. But for you all, when you can talk to your adults, you know, I don't know if they're, you know, obviously when you go into the homes, I know, so I had an experience, my father died also from a terminal illness, and I still remember my hospice nurses. So it was a big role. You know, my dad died very quickly, it was 4 months, but he died at home, and so that was a big part, and that was a big space. I was a teenager at the time. But I remember having conversations with my nurse and our physicians and things like that. And so I don't know how things have transitioned, and I don't know how things have changed. But I don't know if your role is able to, but it's remembering about consistency reminders and reminders for security for the adults and for the child. So it's remembering that that baby needs that constant reminder, the constant hugs. I mean, we know that those babies are getting hugged and things like that at home, but it's, remember, if it's a nuclear home or whatever type of home you're going into, that baby is probably getting shuffled around a little bit because that adult, that caretaker is probably taking care of the person who is dying in the home or in the hospice, or if you're going, you know, to a hospice home. And so that baby is probably not getting taken care of from the main caretaker, or if the main caretaker is the person who is dying. So it's just trying to be conscious and being aware that that baby still needs that love. If that person who is dying is still able, or if that baby is able to be put on the bed of the person who is dying, even though that person is dying, it doesn't mean that that baby can't be near that person. That baby is sensing the stress, it's sensing the anxiety of the people all around them, right? And so if that person who is holding that baby is stressed, that baby is feeling, it's feeling the heart stress, it's feeling all of the blood pressure, it can feel all of that. And so it's just a reminder of just being as calm as possible, and just having as much security as you can. And so it is truly okay if a baby goes to a hospice. It's truly okay if the baby is around that environment. It really, really is okay to do that if the family chooses to. We are all about pro-choice at Erins House, and so we never want to add additional stress to a family. But just letting the family know that, it is okay, it's not gonna hurt the baby. It's okay to, do these things. It's okay to have that baby, that sense of security. And it's not going to damage the baby if the baby is in the home that it's used to, just because the person who is dying is still in that home. So it's just kind of giving those reminders. If you're able to, again, taking what you all understand and what your protocols are, and then if you're able to hold that baby, that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, to do that. Physical contact is the best thing that you can do for that baby. So maybe the caretaker is uncomfortable, to have that baby around the person who is dying. You all obviously are not uncomfortable to do that. So maybe if that is an option, hey, I'm happy to have that baby, around your person. So holding that, that infant child around the person who is dying, if that's an option and that's a conversation that you're okay to have around that family, that would be a wonderful option to have too, because it's important to have. Because what we've learned at Erins House, again, although the baby is not going to remember any of that information, what's important is the stories later. So what we hear from our kids at Erins House is, I never got that choice. I don't have any memories. I don't have this. And then the adults say, well, I thought I was doing the best thing for you. And that is true. That is a wonderful, beautiful statement. I thought I was doing the best. And there's nothing wrong with that statement, but the more choices that we can offer, even at this stage, is setting up a beautiful foundation for later. So it's just important to offer that. So age 3 to 5 is the first age that we see kiddos at Erins House. This is a really, I have one of these right now. Actually, technically 2 of these at this age. This is just a really fun age. If any of you have any of these in your particular families right now that you're seeing, they're the ones that are flying. What's this? What's this? How are you doing? What are you doing? They're asking you all sorts of questions. These are the kiddos that we call the magical thinkers, however. So these are the kiddos that you do have to watch out for, though. These are the kiddos that think that they may have caused what is happening to the person who is dying, however. They are also the kiddos that think if they touch their person that is dying, that they now have whatever their person is dying from. So they are the ones that might be more standoffish. So they're the ones that may need a little bit more invitation to come see the person who is dying. They might be a little bit curious, but again, it's that whole cootie syndrome, right? So I'm touching it, I'm around it, I'm smelling it, I have it. And so clearly, grandpa, mom, brother, I see that you're sick. I don't want to be sick. I may not understand it completely, but I'm around it, I smelled it, oh my goodness, you sneezed on me, COVID, right? That's hyped up everything. And so I have to have it, or mom, I see you taking care of grandpa. You've been touching him, taking care of him. Does that mean that you have it and now you're going to die? So that can bring on a whole other conversation. And so what I would invite for all of you is, if you're able to, and again, if your jobs allow you to, is using concrete language. So inviting that kiddo in again, and this is having a conversation with the family though too. If you're able to, like, hey, is it okay if I invite so-and-so? It seems as though they're curious on what I'm doing. Like if you're changing, whatever it is that you're changing, and you think that it's okay and appropriate for them to see what you're doing. It looks like Johnny seems to be pretty curious about what I'm doing. Would it be okay if I invite him? And it's okay if he denies you, of course. But it looks like he's curious, would it be okay if I invite him? And then invite him like, hey buddy, it looks like you're pretty curious, do you want me to tell you what I'm doing? And then you're literally just kind of out loud saying what you're doing, and then you're just, I'm changing this, I'm doing this, and this is for this, and you're just kind of out loud saying what you're doing. That helps them understand that you can't catch those things, you're healthy and you're doing these things and you're right in there, and that helps them with the magical thinking. Because the big thing about this age group is they do not yet have the conceptualization that death is something that is permanent. So that 6 to about, or this is grade 5, but they do not understand that death is something that is permanent. So they may know that family may have been honest enough to say that grandpa's cancer is going to cause him to die, and that's why you are in their home. And they might repeat that to them, but they might not understand that death equals permanent. Or if that family doesn't use concrete language and they say, well, grandpa's passing away, or grandpa's going to go to sleep. They literally think grandpa's going to sleep, so when's he going to wake up and when is he going to come back? So we really encourage concrete language, especially at your profession. Even if the family's not going to, we don't correct the family. If the family's using their words, let them use the words. But then we, at Erins house, we always just encourage, so even if a kiddo says, oh, grandpa passed away, okay, grandpa died. So I'm not correcting the kiddo, but I'm just reflecting back in a concrete language term to help them understand. So as they get older, they'll understand that death equals something that's permanent. And then if you're able to answer questions as honestly as you can. Obviously you don't want to give detailed information. So at this age group, obviously they don't have a huge range of words, so they're not going to ask you a huge range of questions. But again, having a conversation with the family, that hey, it's okay, they've been asking me a couple of questions maybe about a certain device that they have in the home, or a certain tool that they have at home, or whatever things that you're using. Would it be okay if I answer some of the questions that they have? And these are going to be little questions that they have, because these are little kiddos that they have. And repetition. So they may ask you the same questions every single time, but that's how these little kids learn. And then, for you guys, not so much interactive play and role play, but at Erins house, we actually have a hospital room, and so we do a lot of interactive play and role play there for them, so they can act out maybe what they've seen in their home, if their person died of an illness, now they can get back into the hospital a little bit, but beforehand, so we do a lot of that with them. For 6 to 9-year-olds, so here, at the beginning of this age group, they still don't understand that death is something that is permanent. As they get right at the tip of this age group, they do understand that death is something that's permanent. Obviously, their language skills are getting a little bit better. Here, the Cootie syndrome is gone, and what is kind of curved now is they are very interested in sort of the physical aspects of death and illness. And so that's why I kind of put right at the end the CSI. They're kind of our CSI groups. I feel like those people that kind of get into forensics kind of stay this age group, I feel like, because they are very physical. So the questioning still happens. What's that? What are you doing? But they're kind of like really wanting to get detailed. So what are you doing there? Like, what is that for? Like, they're getting really specific about that kind of stuff. So I'll give you an example. When it comes to actual death, when you come to like a funeral home or like a viewing, and you have the caskets, right? You only typically have like the top half of the caskets open. I'm not really sure why that is. I should really figure that out. They are so physical about stuff that most of the questions that are talked about at Erins house is, why is the bottom not there? Usually the conversation is, I think the bottom is because they've chopped the legs off. I know that they drain the blood, they do all this stuff. The bottom, it's gotta be gone. Like, that's why they do it, because they can only fit it halfway through. Well, all right, guys, let's have more of a conversation about this. Like, no, I've opened up the bottom half. This is here, and then we have like this huge conversation about this. Well, then my person was cremated. He fit into this little thing. I think so like they're really physical about stuff. And so we have like open conversations about this. So they're really, really physical about stuff. So that's where they might be getting all up in your business about like, really, what are you doing? What's in your bag? What are you doing? Like, what's happening? If you're physically in a hospice place, all the sounds, all the buzzers, all the smells, like what's all this stuff? Like, they might be really physical about that. So that may be an opportunity, or maybe really annoying. I'm not really sure what you're feeling that day about what you're doing and what's happening. So here, guilt and blame really starts to happen, which is kind of, I mean, it's not kind of, it's pretty sad. You know, this is where that regression starts to happen that I talked about at the really beginning. This is where we really start to see it. This is where our kids, they don't wet beds anymore. I mean, we still have nightmares from here and there, but these are the kids that can go into school just fine. These are the kids that like don't need to know what you're doing every second of the day. These are the kids that know their routines. They know how to get their homework done. These are the kids that can kind of, you know, they know their stuff. They know their consistency. They know what boundaries-ish to push, right? But these are the kids that you can really see the regression when somebody has a terminal illness in their house, or when somebody then dies. So these are the regressions that you get. So if it's a main adult or a main caregiver or someone that really close to that lives in their house that gets sick and dies, this is where you see that regression that happens a lot. Guilt and blame comes into play a lot here because maybe I didn't do enough. I was really mean to my brother, and that's why grandma died. You know, I didn't help enough, and that's why my mom died of cancer, and she didn't get better. That's why the medicine didn't work. You know, it's like all of those kinds of stuff. I had a kiddo at Erins' house. This was a while ago now, but it was a kiddo this was like the 5th kiddo that this family was having, and he was like the 2nd or 3rd kid in line. And you were having the 5th kid, and this kid was like, I don't want another sibling. Like, we're good. We have 4 of them already, right? And the baby died at like 6 months. Oh. And for so long, that kid blamed himself. He never verbalized those words to his family, but because he had those thoughts, he was 7 when his baby brother died. And for so long, it took him probably 3 years at Aaron's house before he said, I killed my baby brother. And I'm thinking, you know, and I reflected and we talked about it a long time, and I didn't directly ask, well, how did you kill your baby brother? But we reflected a lot. We used some tools and some drawings, and he's like, because I didn't want him. I didn't want another sibling. And, you know, we did what we could, but then I had to refer out because I'm like, that's more than what we can do for him. And so, you know, it's like, but it's just these little thoughts. They think it's still that magical thinking that they can cause things and that they can do things, and the guilt and the shame that he felt for his family. That was a lot. So it's just a lot that kids can take on at this age. You know, and like I said, we as caregivers, we can stuff a lot of stuff in, but I mean, there's enough that we can do where it's like, you know, we as even parents and adults, like I'm really mindful of like saying, man, you're gonna cause me to, you know, like we as parents, I think we said, you can cause me to give me a heart attack. I've had parents and adults tell me that at Erin's house, that, and then, you know, somebody has died of a heart attack in their family. I'm like, oh, try to be mindful never to say those kinds of things, because, you know, kids just feel this guilt and they think that their words can create these health problems, and that's not the case. Or because I thought I had cooties and I didn't see, you know, that, you know, I didn't go see my person enough. That's why they, you know, they didn't get better. So things that we can do, things that you all can do in the home. Again, it's all, you know, you said you weren't going to get a hot, like, was going to give you all the things. It's answering those questions. So they're still going to ask you questions. Like I said, they're going to be annoying about it, but they're going to ask you, what is that? What are you doing? No one else is going to answer those questions for you. I'm going to tell you right now. And we get that a lot at Erin's house. Like sometimes we are the only ones that will sit there and we will listen to their questions. And, you know, at least at Erin's house, we have other viable audience members that have the same questions, right? And so we just kind of let them, give them a space to do that. For you all, you have the answers for at least the equipment that you're using and why, and maybe why so-and-so is starting to smell, you know, and why they're making noises and why, you know, I remember my dad like losing all the hair and like his, you know, cheekbones are sinking in, and why the feeding tube, why are all these things happening? As a caregiver taking care of somebody who is dying, I'm probably gonna be breaking down and I'm not gonna be able to answer those questions, and that's too hard for me. You may be the only person to be able to answer that. And so as a caregiver, I may be like, yes, please, could you answer some of those questions? That might be really helpful. Because they're gonna keep asking me as a kid, why, and I'm not gonna want to answer those questions as an adult taking care of my person who is dying. So it might be great for you all to help me as a caregiver to answer some of those as my kids. And then talking to the children and not at the children. So a lot of times, think of it, you know, you're going into a home, or if you're going into like a hospital type place, a lot of times the kiddos, they might not even be, you know, depending if they're really young, you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, the kids might not be allowed to. I mean, obviously we want the kids to be near the person who is dying, but they might not be allowed to all the time. You know, they're delicate, right? And so, you know, because of the feeding tubes, because of the, you know, the breathing equipment, all the stuff that might be around that person, they might have to be so careful, right? And the younger they are, it might be like, oh, you're there, you know, we can only be maybe this close, or you have to be so gentle, oh, you can't give them a hug, you know, like, oh, we might have to be wearing these masks, right? We might have to be, things might be so different. And so I might not be really talking to my child anymore. I would be like, hey, you know, like I didn't scream at my kids, but, you know, I was like, like, you know, my children this morning. And so, you know, I'm not really talking, you know, and think of the caregiver, I'm stressed out, I'm still having to do school, I'm still having to do homework. Maybe I'm still getting my kids into after school activities, I'm maybe still holding a job, barely holding myself together, like there's a lot going on. And so, you know, just taking a moment, if you have the opportunity in your caseload, to sit and talk to that kiddo for a couple of minutes. You know, it doesn't even have to be about their person, but just talking to the kids, like just hi. You know, like it's not, you know, it doesn't even have to be that, it's just talking to them and not at them is a huge, huge impact for those kiddos. They just want to know that they're being heard. And I don't even have someone who's dying, and sometimes I don't talk to my kids. You know, I'm talking at them because there's so many things that we have to get done. So, you know, emotional words, artwork journals, choices. Choices are huge. That may be something that you're able to do when you're in the home. Like if you can have a helper, I don't know, again, all the things that you're doing, but if there's like maybe if it's needing new towels or needing to get cups of water for the person who is dying, little simple things like that, like, hey, you know, if you've got someone who's curious and the kid is at home when you're there, you know, like, hey, would you mind getting me a cup of water? You know, like letting them know they're helpful and useful and giving them and providing them small choices. Like, hey, I'm not sure which blanket, you know, your person wants. Blue one or red one, you know, simple little things like that. Choices are huge because at the end of the day, this family didn't choose for this to happen, you know, and so choices, that is what we advocate so much for these families. After the death is choices, because sometimes life makes them have to have choices after the person dies, and most of the time the kids are not part of those choices that they have to make, and so even those simple tiny choices that you can have the child included in is huge. And so if you can include that in the choices, especially even after the person dies, or when you know you have to come to that point of some of the choices when that person is at the point of dying and the kid doesn't help with that, can be really, really big. I know that that's hard and sometimes they're quick choices, but it can really mean a lot. So 10 to 13-year-olds, I'm looking at my time to make sure, what is 15 minutes I think I have? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go through it. All right, so ages 10 to 13. Oh, these are fun. These guys are fun. These guys, obviously, they understand that death is something permanent. I don't know, do you never see any of these age in the households? These are probably still interested in some of those physical aspects. Maybe because they're not with others in this age group, they may actually still ask you some of the questions. I put anger in there because everyone's really angry, but, these are the preteens. So think about physically what's going on in their bodies too. They're going through puberty, they're going through so much stuff. And now they have somebody who is dying and who has been given a terminal illness. When it comes to their social aspect of life, they're different. And more than likely, nobody else has this going on in their social circles. And so they just instantly feel different, and already they're in that teen frame of mind. And so they're mini teenagers, right? And so they just instantly feel different, and so they're just frustrated and they're angry, and they already have high anxiety. I feel like we're giving birth to kids that are already high anxiety. I don't know why that is. And so they're already in that mindset. And so for these kids, it's that whole talking to and not talking at situation. It's just trying to engage them, trying to get them involved if you can, if they want to, because they're probably being isolated at school, or they're isolating themselves at school, or they're completely feeling themselves involved into something at school, hopefully, if we're lucky. It's giving them detailed information if they want to. So it's asking them if they have any questions about what you're doing. So with them, they're not gonna maybe necessarily ask you what you're doing, but it's just engaging them with conversation and being like, hey, wondering how you're doing, like, hey, do you have any questions about what I'm doing? I'm happy to talk to you about it. Because they're not gonna initiate the conversation with you, but it's you kind of like starting that conversation with them is kind of the best way to get them involved, because they're not gonna ask you. For them, physical outlets, choices, all of that stuff, that's stuff that you can suggest at home, for their adults and their caregivers, which is huge. Physical outlets is really, really huge for them. That all varies and changes, and it's given what their home is like, but it's even like screaming into a pillow, it's punching a pillow, it's even getting a punching bag, different things like that. Journaling, music is huge in this age group, and then in the teenage age group, music and lyrics is huge. Even having them write down their own stuff is just really huge in this age group. But again, it's you engaging the conversation with them. They're not gonna bring it out like the 6 to 9s and the 3 to 5s will. And then the teenagers, you'll never see these guys, maybe you will. But these guys, obviously, these are, you're gonna see one of two sets. So teenagers are either gonna be completely withdrawn, you come in, they're gonna go straight to their rooms, they're gonna have their iPads, they're gonna have their phones, and they're not gonna have anything to do with you. Or you're gonna have the second set, which are gonna be completely involved, and they're like the mini adults in the families. So you're gonna see one or two sets. Either one is not better than the other. I worry about the ones that are the mini adults in the rooms, because they're the mini caretakers, they're the ones that are looking after their siblings, and they're the ones, that are essentially the second adults in the household and stuff. And they just have a lot of responsibilities, whether they've taken it on themselves, which sometimes they do, or they've just unfortunately been given all of those responsibilities in the families and the households. But with this age group, again, you're the one probably going to have to initiate that conversation too, but it's important. If they have any questions, just to kind of ask that open-ended question, and I think my next slide will give you some direct kind of conversation ways to ask those open-ended conversations. For them, if it's possible, I don't know if it is for them to be involved in some of the processes of what you're doing and how you're helping with the patients. If you need help turning the patients, I remember my dad had to be turned a lot because he couldn't move and he had bed sores and stuff like that. So I think I remember helping a little bit with some of that stuff. And with like his body washing and things like that, and I remember him having to use the restroom and stuff, and I would have to help with that. So I remember them educating my mom and myself to do some of those things so that he wouldn't have to be placed in hospice outside of the home, so they can help and be involved with that process. Of course, I wanted to be, but I could have gone the other way. But I wanted to help my mom in just general conversations, how school, sports, different things like that. Obviously getting them involved with the peer support, so it's like suggestions like that for the adults that are in their homes, personal interest, different things like that. But again, it's you guys engaging them in the conversation. So these are ways for you all, sort of communication tools for ways to kind of support any child, whether it's a teen all the way down to the littles. So at Erins House, we use I wonder questions. So they're open-ended questions or open-ended statements. So as to the fact that we're not using direct questions. So whether it's a teenager or whether it's a little, whether I am in a group setting or whether I'm in an individual setting, I will ask the phrase, I wonder. So whether I see something that's happening or I hear something or I generally have a curiosity about something, I will literally say, I wonder, instead of saying, hey, do you want to go do this? So like, for example, last week, my husband's now caught on and he now uses it back to me and it frustrates me. But like there was a sink full of dishes last week, for example, and I was real frustrated about it. And I'm like, I wonder if you should have done those dishes before you started playing your Xbox last night. And he was like, I wonder if you could have done them before you went to bed. And I just looked at him like, yeah. I use a choice word, I'm sure, but it was not directing the statement like, you should have done those dishes last night before you played your Xbox, yo. Because that's the way I wanted to say it, versus like, I wonder, makes it like open-ended. So we could have just shut the conversation down with the I wonder instead of saying you, right? And so in a peer setting, that's awesome. In an individual setting, that's awesome too, because let's pretend you're, doing something with a patient and you see a kiddo in the background, it's like, hey, I wonder if you want to come over and see what I'm doing, versus, do you want to come over and see what I'm doing? Do you want to come over and see what I'm doing? It requires an answer, right? It's like yes or no. But like, I wonder if you want to come over and see what I'm doing, kind of leaves it open-ended. So like the kid can go run away. But like, do you? Sort of politely says you have to answer me yes or no. So I wonder literally everything. Now you gotta pick a battle. You guys are probably not in the home as much as we want to. At Erins House, obviously we don't I wonder literally everything because we're with the kids for an hour and 15 minutes. And we can't I wonder every single question that we ask. So we strategically implement those questions at the right time. Reflective listening. So it's literally, you guys know this, but it's like you're reflecting back what you hear. So I'm like, I'm hearing that, or you're sounding pretty frustrated right now. So it's you're reflecting back, or I'm reflecting what I see. So it looks like you're kind of, not super engaged with the group right now, or like, it looks like you're pretty uncomfortable with what I'm doing. It's okay if you don't want to be here. So like if, I don't know, if a family forced a kiddo to be right there, or maybe you're having to, I don't know if your responsibility is that you have to take a person off life support. I'm not really sure, but like if you had to, or you have to be there with somebody's last breath, and the family's forcing, a kiddo to be there, it just looks like you're really uncomfortable. It's okay, you don't have to be here. Or, it looks like you're pretty, curious about what's happening, you can come closer, or whatever it is. You're just reflecting what you're seeing, or you're reflecting what you're hearing. It's a really, really powerful thing too. The big ones that I'm gonna show, that I am gonna highlight for you guys are these two right here. Like I told you this morning, there is literally, you're not gonna walk out here with like, yeah, we got everything. We're like, this is it. There's nothing else we're ever gonna need to learn, because even I, who've been doing this for so long, and I have mentors that have been doing this for double as amount of me time that I've been doing it. There isn't. Kids turn on a dime. Even kids from 5 years ago are different than kids who are 5 years from now, and they're still teaching us every time. There's no magical words that's going to make this pain go away, and all of you know this. There is nothing that makes grief any better. Grief is something that is forever. And I don't tell kids that, like I don't look at kids and say, hi, welcome to Erin's house, you're gonna be dealing with this forever. We don't tell that kids, and I don't expect you guys to tell kids that, or families that when you go into their homes. It's a roller coaster. It's never gonna suck this much 10 years from now. You know, it's never gonna be as bad as it is right now when they're in their, you know, when you're in their home and you're dealing with their loved ones right now. It's never gonna be this thick and this hard right now. You know, things are gonna get better, things are gonna get less stress, things are gonna get less hard. But there's gonna be moments, right? There's gonna be grief reminders. And we're gonna go up and we're gonna go down. And we can go up, but hopefully with help, with guidance, with support, with people that we love, and with people throughout our lives that help support us, we're gonna dip and then we're gonna come back up, you know, and our dips are gonna be a little less dipped, you know, throughout our lives. And so there aren't any magical words. And that's why, so when Sherry and I were having this conversation, she's like, you all had it. And she knows that you all have it already. You wouldn't have chosen this profession if you didn't already have it. You know, and then silence. Silence really is your biggest tool that you can use. You know, as long as you're engaging with these kids that you meet and that you're not ignoring them and you're, you know, acknowledging that they're there, you're being kind to them and just not ghosting them when they're there, you're doing the best thing that you can do for them. And they're gonna remember you. If I don't remember the name of any of the hospice nurses that came to my dad's house. And I was a 17-year-old brat when those hospice nurses came. I don't remember their names, don't remember what their hair colors were, but I remember them. And I remember them because they talked to me even though I was a brat. And I remember them because they helped me take care of my dad. That's the best thing that you can do, and that's the best job that you can do. And so there's no magical words, but in the moments of their worst time in their lives, the best thing that you can do is just be there and support them. And when you have no words, know that that really truly is the best communication tool that you can use, is just sit there with them and to be silent with them. And sometimes, like I said, their people and their lives don't have the words, and sometimes we jumble, we just make words. Or we're like, I can't talk to you right now, you know, because there's too much stuff going on. And so sometimes just sitting there and listening to them, even when that is when you're working with their person who they love, who's dying, that's the best thing that you can do. So in my 1 minute, I have any questions that you all have. I have some handouts for you. I would be remiss to just remind you all to take care of yourselves. I know it's hokey. I'm sure you probably hear it a million gazillion times, self-care, but you need to take care of yourselves so that you can be the best for you to take care of your people as well. I could never be the priest. I'll take post any day. I could never do what you all do, so thank you so much for all that you do for this community. But you all have very important jobs to do. But I'm around if you all have any questions, but don't forget to take care of yourself.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone back and like when you said like the teens, like the ones that are like the mini adults versus the ones that don't get involved and see like what group does better? Because I wonder if the ones that like, you know, put their earphones in and just like head up the stairs, if they later in life have more regret because maybe they weren't involved. I didn't know like what kind of follow-up you have.
So we're working on that. So we belong to like the National Alliance for Grieving Children, and there hasn't been a ton. We're trying to work on like, so we have like our own little like Erins house, right? Like stats and different things like that. And that's not one of the questions that we ask, like what type, you know, like were you know, we do ask like how did the person die, but we don't know like were you the one that withdrew or were you the one that, but we as a national alliance are trying to figure that out. Like if you were somebody who didn't have a lot to do with your person who died and you knew your person was gonna die, how? Because we are trying, because there is a lot of guilt.
Right, because I wonder
at
if
least
they
in
have
conversations,
regret.
that's what we hear.
Yeah, if there would be regret, like, you know, I wish I would have
Cause we hear that a lot, but then on the spin side, we have heard a lot, and the reason I brought that up was with the ones that are caretakers, is that I missed out on a lot. Because I was the secondary parent, I missed out on getting to go to prom, getting to do all this stuff, because I took care of my person who was dying. So there, it was, like, but we just had like our small little Erins house subset of that, and that's just through conversations through our team, because I mostly do teens and adults, at Erins house, but.
Like, I've had a couple of families that have younger children, and, like, in particular, there was one woman, and her stepson was 20, but I mean, so he wasn't that far removed from this, and she thought, because there wasn't good conversation of like what his role was gonna be, like that she wouldn't die in the home, because that's not what he wanted, and that's not what her husband wanted, but it was like nobody was communicating that, and then the stepson actually was kind of involved in her care, and it was very helpful. But if there's not communication to know like what everybody's role was gonna be, and what everybody's expectation is
To
gonna
have
be.
that communication, and even the littles, and I think that's the hard part, is people just forget about the littles, and I think it's important to, as much as you can, if you can, to involve the littles as much as you can, and I get that they don't understand, but it's even to the point of, do you wanna go visit? And I know that a lot of people are like, no, we're going, cause this is the last, these are the last couple times that we're going to be able to go see. But so many times now, our kids, and again, it's all about choice, but at least later on in life, we could be like, well, we gave you that choice, and you chose not to, whether that was the right or the wrong choice, at least, you have sort of that foundation that you gave the choice. Cause now, at least what we're seeing in Erin's house, and what we've always seen, is the kids either were not given the choice and they wish they would have, or they weren't given that choice, and that's all that they know now, is that last, is what they saw, what they, and so then we paint that picture of, well, if you had been given the choice and you made the different choice, then let's paint that picture of what would that have looked like. And there's, and we all try, as parents and as caregivers and as adults, we do the best that we can, and that's all you can do, and that's what we try to encourage those families, in those dire circumstances, in those situations, we're just trying to do the best that we can, and so, there's no wrong way to do something like that when you're going through something like that. It's just encourage choices as much as you can, and if it's not that, then let's choose Culver's or Chick-fil-A tonight, if you can, so.